So, Google Pixel Fold or Samsung Z Fold 5. And yes, we do say Z in this country. Is the choice easy? Nah. The foldable phone market is expanding and opening up, if you excuse the horrible pun. One of the latest additions to it is the Google Pixel Fold. And based on pricing and specs and just the sheer size of Google, I think this phone is taking on one other phone in particular, which is the Samsung Z Fold 5. Now I've got quite a bit of experience with the Z Fold 4. I used this as my daily driver for a number of months earlier this year. Now hands up, I haven't got my Z Fold 5 review in it yet. I'm still waiting for that to arrive, but I have played with it. So I spent quite a bit of time with that device before launch, behind the scenes with Samsung. And well, it's not a massive update to the Z Fold 4, but it is the latest version. And if you're thinking about buying either the Samsung foldable or the Google foldable, this is the video to watch. I am going to keep this comparison pretty straightforward because you've got limited time, I've got limited time, and also you've probably watched all of the Z Fold 5 and Google Pixel Fold reviews already. If you haven't checked out my Pixel Fold review, by the way, the link is above somewhere. I'm going to get down to brass tacks with this, as we say. Well, the first thing is, if you've never owned a foldable phone before, like the Flip or the Fold or the Pixel Fold, there are three things to bear in mind. The first thing is that they are astronomically expensive, like really expensive, which means you've really got to want one to buy one. The second thing is that you get a crease on the screen. You can't avoid it. It's there, it's going nowhere. We are, I think, years away from this disappearing. If that bothers you, and if you hate the idea of seeing it and feeling it, then these phones aren't for you. The third thing is that opening and closing these phones is a bit of an event. It's another step in the ownership experience, whereas with the normal smartphone experience like the S23 Ultra, there's no opening and closing, it's just there all the time. And yes, you do get front displays on these phones, which I'll come on to, but to really justify that price tag, you've got to open them. And yes, initially it is a bit of a novelty to keep opening your phone and marveling at the tech that enables the display to fold in half. That novelty does wear off. And it's when that novelty wears off where the separation between the genuine hardcore fold user and the person who just bought it because it looks cool really comes into effect. If you fall into the latter camp, then these phones aren't for you. But if you think you have the stamina and the budget for a foldable phone, let's get into this comparison. Okay, there are some spec differences between these two phones and pricing differences which are definitely worth mentioning. The Pixel Fold starts at £1,749, which gets you the 256GB version, and it tops out at £1,869 for the 512GB version. The Z Fold 5 starts at £1,749, so identical to the Pixel Fold, again for 256GB, and the top tier, which is 1 terabyte of storage for the Z Fold 5, is £2,049. That said, and depending on when you watch this video, Samsung does some very nice launch deals, so you can get the phone for a bit cheaper, and they also have one of the best trade-in things as well. So if you've got an S23 Ultra, or even, in fact, any phone, they should give you a fairly decent price for it. They use different chips as well, so the Z Fold 5 has the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2, whereas the Pixel Fold has Google's own Tensor G2 chip. I haven't done any benchmarks between the two because, well, I don't have my Z Fold 5 yet, and also I don't really care. In general everyday use, these are both incredibly quick phones. One of the biggest differences between the Pixel Fold and the Z Fold 5 is the form factor. So the Pixel Fold is a very kind of small, not small, but a squat kind of chunky, meaty device, which I really like. The Z Fold 5, on the other hand, is much narrower and taller, so when you close these two phones, they look very different, and they have very different cover screens. The Z Fold 5's is 6.2 inches, and the Google Pixel's is 5.8. Despite that difference in form factor, when you open them, they both have a 7.6-inch internal display. The Fold 5's is brighter at 1750 nits versus the 14 1450 nits on the Pixel Fold, but, well, they look very, very similar. And they feel very similar as well because they both have that 120 Hz adaptive refresh rate. The one big noticeable difference between these two displays is the bezel size. The Pixel Fold has big bezels. There's no getting away from it. It doesn't bother me. I quite like having something to grab onto with these big displays. But if you're part of the war against bezels, then the Z Fold 5 is the one to go for because it has extremely thin bezels around that main screen. The battery life is the same between these two phones. The camera system is completely subjective, so I'm not going to include it in this comparison, even though for me the Pixel Fold wins hands down because I absolutely love Pixel photography, but you might love Samsung photography. It's completely up to you. So by now you might have decided which one to go for based on the pricing, the design, the camera system, those bezels. There might be something that has triggered your decision. If that's the case, brilliant. Give me a thumbs up if you don't mind, if you enjoyed the video, and go and buy your favorite foldable. If, however, you're still stuck, I want to very quickly go through the best features of both phones. It won't take long, I promise, and I promise as well that by the end of it, you'll know which one to get. Let's start with the Google Pixel Fold, and I think it has two amazing assets. The first one is this. It's the front display, which I mentioned earlier. It's just an absolute joy to use. In fact, I'd go as far to say that if every smartphone adopted this form factor for the display, I'd be a very happy man. It's not too tall, so you don't have to do loads of finger gymnastics to get to the top of the screen. It's nice and wide, so you get a lovely typing experience. This is the problem, actually. The thing with the Pixel Fold is that the best feature it has is also its Achilles heel, because this display is so good you barely have to go into the big display. But that takes me back to what I said right at the start of this video. If you are a proper fold person, that won't bother you because you will use this big screen all the time. If, like me, you're somewhere in between, you might find yourself using this display far more because it's so good, which then, well, does it justify the cost? I guess having that and that is, well, it does justify the cost. Let's just, yeah, it does, it's fine. It definitely justifies the cost. But the point being, if you want the best front display on your foldable phone, this is the one to get. The second greatest thing about the Pixel Fold is that camera system, and again, I'm not going to get into the weeds with this. I'll show you some examples so you can make up your own minds. For me, Pixels just take the best photos straight out of the camera. And in my opinion, if you want the best foldable phone with the best camera, then the Google Pixel Fold is the one to go for. I absolutely love the images this thing takes. On to the Samsung Z Fold 5, and I think it has one major advantage, which is the fact that it is the 5th generation of this device. Samsung has been making foldable phones for a long time. Well, a relatively long time. So the first one appeared in 2019, so they've had several years to really hone their craft, get that hinge right, get the display right, and basically create a phone which should last the test of time. By comparison, the Google Pixel Fold is a brand new device. We don't know the long-term effects of this in terms of build quality and resistance to continual opening and folding. I've had no problems with mine so far, but if you want absolute peace of mind that you're buying into something that has been around for a long time, then it's hard to look past Samsung. The other thing is completely aesthetic, and it won't matter to everyone, but if you do want the most modern looking foldable phone, then I think the Z Fold 5 is hard to beat. It doesn't have big bezels, which again might bother you, doesn't bother me, but if it bothers you, then there's no competition. And to be balanced and fair, the third thing is the camera system, because once again, this is subjective and an awful lot of people love Samsung photos. The point being, guys, if you love Samsung photography, again, the Z Fold 5 is for you. This really is a simple choice, I think, guys, between these two phones, but I appreciate there's lots of other things that you might have on your mind, and if they're still on your mind now, well, I haven't done my job for starters, but if you're still thinking, what about this, what about that, put those questions in the comments, and either I will get back to you, or the lovely community on YouTube, most of them, will answer your question, I'm sure. If you've decided which one you're going for, let me know in the comments. And I really don't want to throw another spanner into the works, but if you want to try a different type of foldable, this one, then keep watching for a link to my full Flip 5 review.